Well, hello and welcome back. Today, we're going to get an invitation, a really loving invitation to leave behind our fear and to choose love, to choose God, to choose the strength of Christ, life, love, in place of fear, in place of shabbiness, in place of all of the limitations of the ego and our ego clinging. The choice that we're invited to make all the time, every moment. Right now, in the present moment, we have this one choice between exactly two options. And on the path, especially when we first really encounter this idea. Now, A Course in Miracles is not the only spiritual tradition that holds an idea somewhat like this, is that we have a choice between two particular options that are 180 degrees opposed to one another. This isn't the only spiritual tradition that says something like this, but it repeats it and repeats it and repeats it all the time. Why? Because it's important. And especially when we first hear the idea, we might resist it. Perhaps you find yourself really resisting this invitation, or even the expression of the idea that there's one choice with exactly two options. One's real, one's not. One leads us home, so to speak. The other one keeps us far, far from home. Far indeed. And to the extent that we believe ourselves to be victims of the world that we see and appear to inhabit, to the extent that we're playing the victim card, we're really quite prone to resist the idea that we could choose to leave fear to the side, leave it behind. Just gently leave it behind, not kick it in the face, not punch it in the face, not bludgeon it with a club, defeat it or crush it in any way. There's no need to do that. And in fact, that won't work anyway, as we discover on the path, because if it's not real, why make an opponent out of it? So here in chapter 4, section 1 of the text, Right Teaching and Right Learning, as we get toward the end of this particular section, there are a couple of paragraphs that talk about the ego's home and God's home that God has prepared for us and the home that we've made in choosing ego identification. In other words, choosing to see ourselves as separate from God. Choosing to see ourselves then, of course, by extension, as separate from one another and competing with one another in all of these fanciful and bizarre systems that very few people actually understand, called economic systems, where we're appearing to compete with one another and do pitched battle. I mean, yeah, when you allow yourself to think about the situation that we've made in the world, it's when you really honestly take a look at it, it's hard not to hear the call of your inner teacher to awaken and to leave this mess to the side, to leave it, just leave it, because we can. And the ego, who has constructed this shabby, unfulfilling home for us, doesn't want us to do that. There's a reason why one of the workbook lessons is I am not the victim of the world I see. I remember very, very well the very first time a decade ago that I ever went through the workbook when I hit that particular idea. It was very, very powerful to me at the time because I thought not just of other people that play the victim card. You may do it yourself, and surely you know people that play the poor me, that I'm the victim of the world. It's out to get me, and it's just oppressive and wrong, and it makes me feel awful every single day, right? We all know people like that. And we see their posts on social media because, as they say, misery loves company. Well, yeah, we're not the victims of the world that we see. We made it, we can unmake it. It's a very powerful idea. We don't have to invest in the home that the ego has fashioned. It doesn't shelter us. It's not safe. It's certainly not safe in a world where everything is impermanent. And yes, that includes the body. I mean, that doesn't last at all. So the ego's world is full of conflict and strife. And we may have pockets of beautiful experiences and relative safety and shelter. In fact, you may live in a very nice, comfortable home. You might be in a beautiful, loving, intimate relationship. You know, whether you're married or not, you may have a hot, sexy partner that you feel safe and comfortable with, and you may have plenty of money and nice things and all of that, and maybe you don't, right? I mean, whether you do or you don't isn't exactly the point here, because when we identify with the ego, again, nothing lasts. As we say in Buddhism, all compound phenomena are impermanent. All of them are impermanent. Every single last compound phenomenon is totally impermanent. That's not real safety. Now, we may experience temporary safety of the body by being sheltered or having a nice income where we don't have to worry about things like keeping the lights turned on and the water being paid for and all of that stuff. So contrast with the ego's unsafety, complete lack of security, safety. We've got our home in God that's eternal and has always been there. Now, in fact, it's not a place like a house that we would consider a home here in the world, because that would imply that there's something outside of the house. It's a dualistic concept, as is everything that we see in the world. House implies non-house, outside house, in other words. And so our home, it's just a word. It's a metaphor that we use for our natural state of being as we were created. It's our home in God. It's eternal and unchanging, everlasting, eternal, everlasting, never goes away. And it's there for us when we're ready to enter it. In other words, it's there for us when we choose to enter it. Powerful, powerful. You're more powerful than you can possibly imagine. I hope you realize this. I really do. I hope you realize how powerful you really are and how beautiful and utterly empowering it is to be able to choose right now to go home, so to speak, to choose God, to choose love, the strength of Christ, choose your real nature and go back home. This is very, very powerful. You're not the victim of the world you see. A victim of the world that we see doesn't recognize that we all have this choice. Someone playing the victim doesn't recognize that they have the very same choice. They're simply choosing the ego, which doesn't make them a bad person at all. It just means they're choosing wrongly right now. They're choosing pain and suffering and death and decay and a lot of misery in the meantime. And perhaps you've been in that situation. We've all experienced periods of time in our lives where things weren't going well. Really, really. Life is a whirlwind like that. You're up one minute, you're rock bottom the next, and then you bounce back up, and then you may fall back down. And the question is, are you tired of the yo-yo? Are you tired of the hamster wheel? Are you tired of the same results over and over and over again? Frustration, pain, fear, bitterness, death, and decay. Are you tired of that? Are you ready to make the choice to go home? We're not actually going anywhere. It's simply the phraseology that we use. That's what this image is using to communicate to you through the tool that we call language, which we need here in the world in order to relate to one another. So that's all. You can give all illusion over to the Holy Spirit, including this illusion. You can give it all over for the purposes of healing. And we're invited in this course to do just that. Give your relationships over to your inner teacher. Let him work through you. Oh, yeah. Your speech, every meeting that you may have, every phone call that you have, every Zoom, your entire experience, your relationships, your dog, your cat, the physical body, everything. Everything is beautiful. We have this choice right now. We could leave behind our fear. So I really hope that you get how beautiful and wonderful it is that we each have this choice. It has not been taken from us. If you're feeling the temptation to play the victim card right now, that's a choice. You may not want to hear that, and that's okay if you don't. Of course you don't. If you're playing the victim card, the last thing you want to hear is you're choosing it. I mean, really, we get that. That makes sense. But it's a choice. So having chosen it, we can choose the opposite. And that has not been stripped from us or taken from us in any way. We have and we retain the power to choose at all times. So understand that we've made this. God doesn't create the perishable. He doesn't. He doesn't create death and impermanence. He's not capable of doing that. Last sentence of paragraph 11. I really want to invite you to sit with this idea and to ponder it. God didn't make this world. We did. So having made it, you got it. We can unmake it. So this last sentence of paragraph 11 that I'm talking about reads as follows. God is as incapable of creating the perishable as the ego is of making the eternal. God hasn't and can't create this world. We've made it. The ego cannot create heaven, which is not a place, by the way. The ego cannot create our home in God, which is changeless, eternal. What we're choosing in the present moment is a choice between the eternal or the perishable. That's another way of looking at it. And which do we choose? The power of choice is great, and you have it. So please, please, the invitation goes out to all of us today to choose God, love, our self with a capital S. Any variation of the languaging there will do. You know what we're talking about, and we're invited to leave behind our fear. And you can, and you know what's even cooler than that? You will. Now, maybe it's not today. Maybe you're having extraordinary doubts, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, doubt happens on the path, doesn't it? These ideas aim to switch our thought system. So as we go forward and begin to adopt them, and as we begin to see and begin to experience, emphasis on experience, as we begin to know, not just intellectually at all. That's important, but what's more important is experience. As we begin to experience this course by our doing it, we begin to see that these ideas are true. It's a powerful thing when that realization hits you. So if you haven't had that yet, I invite you to keep going, and you will. We're all going to wake up. How can I say that for sure? The separation never occurred. We've never been anywhere. We're still at home in God where we've always been. We're simply waking up to that. So let's leave fear behind. All right, so the subscription button is right here. I really appreciate your joining me. The red arrow's over here. If you have not subscribed yet and you would like to, I'd really love to have you. So please go ahead and do that. And also, your comments and questions are more than welcome here. There are many days where we have some very good observations and very good questions. So if you've got them, please feel welcome to leave them. I'm here to serve as a guide for all of you in that manner. So yes, please reach out. And the link to my Patreon page will be here in the description of this video. That's where I'm hosting my weekly live stream. So we'll have up to an hour, maybe more, of discussion with live Q&A. We're able to go into some of these ideas in more detail there. So please join me there as well. And thank you all for your dedication and commitment to practice. And to the extent that you remember today to leave behind fear, do it. It would be really excellent of you. All right. Thank you.